Welcome to Inner Peace Arts Unscripted. I'm your host, James Coleman, inner peace artist, astro shaman, talking about the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and social change, seeing beliefs as stars, making presentations for people to experience the truth as it can be known, to follow in new ideas and actions, making for a better way of life. What an introduction. Today I want to talk a little bit about kind of drawing off a conversation I had with someone, and it's on logic. And I'm going to touch on a lot of different things here. So it's not about logic. We're going to go through, like a formal introduction to logic class, but it's more about the use of logic, the thoughts about logic, etc. And so I'm having a conversation, and I say I try to use logical principles to build kind of the foundations for inner peace arts and for us to share so that we can, build that better way of life. And the implication came that logic was gendered. And so this led to, different types of ways of knowing, and logic as a way of knowing. And you'll see why this is important coming up. Well, I'll just say why it's important, because, I don't see logic as gendered. And like, I don't see color. And, if you're studied any kind of gender or race things, you know that when someone says that, especially a person of, typically people would call, they use black and white people and black people. Well, I use pink and brown or peach and brown to get away from that dichotomy, right? Because I don't think, I think that black and white is actually a kind of magic use in terms of using language to create division. I mean, if you say, peach and brown, it doesn't have the same emotional effect as black and white, right? And so I use peach and brown or pink and brown, whatever. So the logic, I was talking about the logic, right? And I don't see it as gendered. But if you use the term, I don't see color, right, that's called a microaggression from a racial standpoint, which is really very interesting, because what it basically does is, according to a lot of these people, devalue the difference, right? But I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm really just saying that there are things in life that are not gendered, meaning that things that are appropriate to people, that are common to both people, so male and female, or gender, whatever that is, those concepts are irrelevant. So like water, okay, I need water. Now, of course there are systems that assign gender to water, but both men and women and children need water to survive, right? So when we talk about water, there can't be a value that's gender-based that's placed in the object we're talking about. And I think logic is that way. And then you say, okay, what do you mean by logic? What I mean by logic is like the fact that I can speak a sentence and you understand it, right? That 1 + 1 = 2, right? There are a whole host of assumptions that I don't want to get into that, but the bottom line is that concept is not gendered. But we get into this epistemological notions of how we know, and how does logic, play into that. I can have a sense of knowing on the inside that doesn't seem to follow a string of reasons, right? That's typically considered feminine, and a feminine way of creating knowledge. And I argue that it's neither feminine nor masculine, but it's just a way of knowing, and that there is a string of ideas that connect. We're just unaware of them, and that's fine. there's no such thing as being aware of all the connections of any piece of knowledge anyway. Like, so I know as much about the infinity of an apple as I know about the infinity of, say, God, right? You know, there are things about the apple I don't know. There are things about an apple that I may never know, right? So that limitation is not going to be the end for me to not eat the apple. You know, in the same way that there are conceptions about God, the universe, etc., that can be known, extracted, that can be formed in such a way that it's kind of apple-like, and that's the whole point of inner peace arts. So, and another thing that's related to this, that comes from this conversation of logic, is really trying to create a place of shared definition, of shared meaning, that we can grow to express that individuality. So this is getting back to the rice and the spice. Coming back to find, you know, that rice that we can all agree upon as being rice, and then ourselves as individuals bringing on the spice and making for all types of dishes that turn into cultures, beliefs, attitudes, values, etc. So, and logic is, you know, the reasoning, the ability to say this relates to this, and to make inferences. And I understand that the inferences have infinite assumptions, and you never get to a bottom line, and all of that. But that's the boat we live in, and that's the boat that's shared, and that's the boat that we should all kind of be working with to make sure that we are communicating in such a way that we're reflecting the kind of infinite that is in these things, and the infinite harmony that does result from that kind of perspective. So I know this seems like a kind of like a pseudo mumbo jumbo, but it's really not. It's very, you know, and you know, our ability to reason is biologically based, right? You can't reason with a 7-year-old the same way you reason with a 13-year-old, the same way you reason with a 22-year-old, the same way you reason with a 90-year-old, right? Many times our biology plays a part in how we can reason, and our ability to use logic to see those connections, and to see which connections are valid and which connections are invalid or inappropriate or not matching with the agenda, right? And so that's really what I wanted to talk about today, so that when I say logic, you know, I'm not implying a color, I'm not implying a male superiority in terms of a male perspective. I'm really trying to build a basic perspective, let's see my hands, basic perspective that everyone can use to build a shared community. I think it's not, again, this is about agency, right? And agency says that the tools that are available to one, the basic tools, are going to be available to every agent, for every agent to exercise that agency, right? And again, what you do with that agency is another matter, right? But it is at minimum to have this notion of agency to express what you want. And I believe that the notion of agency, when everyone has it, will express a kind of natural harmony that we're not currently experiencing. And that's the belief. That's the religion, in a certain sense, in the sense that it's hard to justify that right now. But the idea is to, it's the hypothesis. That's a better way of putting it, to put it in scientific terms, so people don't get bent out of shape with the word religion in this context. We'll talk about that later. But and this is, listen, and the logic is important in your personal development, right? It allows you to be logical and not be any less feeling. It allows you to be logical and be intuitive. Like intuition is a kind of logic, you know. So it brings a new freedom to what you do and how you make your decisions, right? You can be confident when you see the connections. You can be confident when you feel the connections, right? And at the end of the day, that seeing the connections or the feeling of the connections has to have a real impact on reality, right? So we're not talking about feeling something and, claiming that something is water when it's actually sulfuric acid and then using it as water. Like, that's not going to be the kind of logic that is being proposed here, right? If it's water, it's water. If it's sulfuric acid, it's sulfuric acid, right? And you can't use the two of them in the same way in many situations. So that's what I wanted to talk about this morning. It's all about finding new ways to bring new unity, to bring new language, to bring a sense of basis for getting things done. And that's what I wanted to talk about. So that's what I mean when I use logic. That's the kind of unity I'm trying to bring together. And I hope that all of these little things helped to enlighten you and help you use logic in whatever form, be it, the standard kind of mathematical logic or in the kind of intuitive logic, whichever form works for you, and you use both, right? There's no such thing as non-intuition, right? Non-intuition comes up just as a result of having gained lots of knowledge and experience and then getting a feeling. Feelings are logical, and that is one thing that I think is underestimated of how important feelings are. James Coleman. Check out the blog at innerpeacearts.wordpress.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Facebook and Twitter. As the community grows, I'll start using them differently. And email me, innerpeacearts@protonmail.com. Yavarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. In distinction, thanks be to stream, in stream, by stream.